"Mommy, why is your necklace sleeping in her bag?" The words were so small they almost disappeared beneath the applause, the camera flash, and the soft music drifting through the private dining room of Belladonna, the kind of Manhattan Italian restaurant that closed its doors for families like the DeLucas and made every candle look expensive. Grace Carter stood at the very edge of the engagement table, one hand wrapped around her mother's apron, and the other hugging a faded cloth doll with one missing eye. She was 4 years old, too short to see over most of the white roses, too quiet for anyone in the room to remember she was there. But her eyes had not moved for almost a full minute. They were fixed on the cream-colored handbag tucked beneath Alessandra Bellini's elbow. Alessandra stood beside Vittorio De Luca in a pearl-white dress, smiling for the photographer as if happiness had been tailored for her. Vittorio, in a black suit cut so sharply it seemed to hold the room in place, kept one hand near the silver watch that had belonged to his father. Around him, cousins, business partners, old family friends, and polished guests lifted champagne glasses and waited for the perfect picture. The photographer stepped back, raised his camera, and said, "One more smile." That was when the flash lit the table, and for half a second, Grace saw the thing again. A thin gold chain, no longer than a pencil, slipped from the mouth of Alessandra's handbag before being swallowed by a fold of silk. It was not much. Adults would have missed it. They were busy looking at diamonds, flowers, the ring on Alessandra's finger, the way Vittorio stood beside her like a man who had already made up his mind. But Grace knew that chain. She knew the soft yellow shine of it. She knew the little round pendant that clicked when her mother opened it at night. She knew the scratch on the back shaped like a moon with a bite taken out of it. Naomi Carter heard her daughter's whisper and went still. The silver serving tray in her hands tipped just enough for a spoon to slide against a glass with a tiny, bright sound. It was not loud, but Vittorio heard it. His eyes left the camera. First he looked at Naomi, whose face had gone pale under the warm dining room lights. Then he looked down at Grace, who had pressed the doll against her chest as if the toy could protect her from the grown-ups. Then he looked at Alessandra's hand. Her smile stayed perfect for the photograph, but her fingers had closed around the handbag too quickly. The knuckles were almost white. The photographer checked his screen and laughed softly, unaware of the crack forming in the room. "Beautiful," he said. "Absolutely beautiful." Alessandra leaned closer to Vittorio, still smiling, still elegant, still the woman everyone had been told was perfect for him. "Shall we take the next one by the cake?" she asked, her voice smooth enough to pass over broken glass. But Grace did not look at the cake. She did not look at the flowers. She stared at the bag the way a child stares at a closet door after hearing something move inside. Naomi bent down quickly and whispered, "Grace, sweetheart, not now." Grace's lower lip trembled, but she did not cry. She only pointed with one small finger toward Alessandra's arm. "But Mommy," she said a little louder this time, "you said Grandma gave it to you. You said nobody should touch it." This time more people heard. A cousin stopped laughing. A waiter froze with a pitcher of water in his hand. Somewhere near the head of the table, Signora Moretti, the family matchmaker, turned her head with the slow patience of a woman who had spent her life making problems disappear before important men noticed them. Vittorio did not move toward Grace. He did not soften his face. He did not kneel, not yet. He simply rested his palm on the white tablecloth and watched Alessandra shift the handbag from her right side to her left. It was a tiny movement, private movement, the kind of movement guilty people pray no one notices. Vittorio noticed. And in that quiet second, before anyone accused the child, before Naomi could apologize, before Alessandra could hide the bag completely, the most powerful man in the room realized something impossible. His engagement had not been interrupted by a little girl. It had been interrupted by a clue. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The little sound of the spoon against the glass seemed to hang above the table longer than the music. Then the room remembered what it was supposed to be. Elegant, controlled, expensive, and loyal to the people at the center of it. Signora Moretti crossed the carpet first, her black dress whispering around her shoes, her smile arriving before the rest of her face did. She did not look angry. That was what made her colder. She bent toward Grace as if speaking to a child at church and said, "Sweetheart, shiny things can confuse little eyes. That is not your mother's necklace. That is Miss Bellini's evening bag." Grace stepped closer to Naomi's leg. The doll's cloth arm dragged against the floor. Naomi lowered her head so quickly that the small gold pins in her hair caught the light. "I am sorry, Mr. DeLuca," she said, her voice almost gone. "She is tired. She does not understand." But Grace did understand one thing. Her mother only used that voice when she was afraid of losing work. One of the older guests gave a soft laugh, the kind people use when they want discomfort to become someone else's problem. Another woman near the flowers murmured that children of staff should not be near the family table during formal pictures. A waiter looked down at his shoes. Nobody asked Grace what she had seen. They only decided what her seeing was worth. Alessandra placed one graceful hand over Vittorio's sleeve. "It is all right," she said, gentle enough for everyone to hear. "The child probably saw the chain on my bracelet. I would never be offended by a little girl's imagination." The sentence sounded kind, but her fingers never left the cream-colored bag. Signora Moretti turned to Naomi. "Take her to the kitchen. Give her some cake. We will forget this happened." Naomi nodded, already pulling Grace back, but Grace resisted just enough for the movement to be visible. Not a tantrum, not defiance. Only two tiny shoes sliding half an inch on the polished floor. "Mommy," she whispered. "It was yours." The room tightened. A tall manager in a dark jacket stepped behind Naomi and placed a careful hand near her shoulder, not pushing, only making the direction clear. Toward the service doors. Away from the white roses. Away from the people whose names were printed on the menus. Grace looked down as Naomi turned her, and that was when she saw it. A single golden thread had caught on the cracked button sewn to her doll's blue dress. It was so thin it almost looked like hair, but it shone differently under the chandelier. Grace touched it with one finger. It clung to the cloth, curled and delicate, the way the edge of her mother's necklace sometimes snagged in the sewing box. She did not know evidence. She did not know inheritance. She did not know why adults could smile while making someone disappear. She only knew the thread had come from the place everyone said she had imagined. Vittorio saw her looking at the doll. He saw Naomi trying to apologize with her whole body. He saw Moretti watching him instead of watching the child. That mattered. In his world, people watched the danger. Moretti was watching his decision. The manager began guiding Naomi again. Vittorio lifted two fingers. The movement was small, but the room obeyed it before anyone understood why. The manager stopped. The music softened uncertainly. Alessandra's smile held, but only because she forced it to. Vittorio's voice came low across the table. "No child is removed from my table before I know what frightened the adults." Signora Moretti gave a little laugh. "Vittorio, please. This is your engagement. We should not let a servant's child turn a family celebration into a scene." Naomi flinched at the word servant. Grace felt it through her mother's leg, the smallest shake, the kind of hurt adults try to hide from children. Vittorio looked at Moretti for a long moment. Then he looked at Grace. He did not soften. He did not offer candy. He did not pretend this was a game. He simply pointed to the doll and asked, "What is on her dress?" Grace raised the doll slowly. The golden thread trembled from the button. Alessandra's hand closed harder around the bag. Moretti's smile thinned. Naomi whispered, "Grace, do not touch anything." But the thread was already there, bright against the faded cloth. A tiny line between the child nobody wanted to hear and the woman everyone wanted to believe. Vittorio leaned forward just enough for the candlelight to catch the silver watch at his wrist. "Tell me exactly what you saw," he said. Grace swallowed. Her eyes moved from the bag to her mother, then back to the bag. And behind Alessandra's perfect smile, something finally slipped out of place. Vittorio did not ask Grace to come closer. He knew the difference between inviting a child and making a child feel trapped. So he stayed where he was, one hand resting on the tablecloth beside the untouched champagne, the other near the old silver watch on his wrist. "What necklace?" he asked. His voice was quiet, but the question moved through the private dining room like a cold draft under a locked door. Grace looked at Naomi first, not at Vittorio, not at Alessandra. Her eyes went to her mother because children know where fear lives before they know what fear is called. Naomi gave the smallest shake of her head, begging her daughter without words to let it go, to stay safe, to let rich people keep whatever they wanted to keep. But Grace lifted her doll anyway. The golden thread still clung to the cracked blue button on the doll's dress. "Mommy's necklace has a little moon on the back," Grace said. "Not a pretty moon. A broken one." A few guests shifted in their chairs. Someone near the flowers whispered that this was ridiculous. Signora Moretti smiled as if patience itself had put on pearls and come to dinner. "Children make shapes out of anything," she said. "A scratch can look like a moon, a star, a fish. This is why adult matters should remain with adults." Vittorio did not look at her. He watched Grace use her tiny fingernail to draw a curved mark across the center of her own palm. She pressed too hard, leaving a pale line in the skin. "Like this," she said. "Because I dropped it." Naomi closed her eyes. That was the first time the room saw something break in her face. Not anger, not shame, memory. Grace went on, softer now. "It fell by the stove. Mommy said, 'Oh no, Gracie, the moon got bitten.' Then she kissed it and put it in the blue box." Vittorio's eyes moved to Naomi. "Is that true?" Naomi opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. The silver tray was still in her hands, tilted against her waist like a shield too thin to protect anyone. "Yes," she said at last. "There was a scratch behind the pendant. The clasp was damaged too. It made a small click when it opened. But Mr. De Luca, I am not accusing anyone. I do not want trouble." Alessandra gave a soft sigh, perfectly measured, the kind that made people feel unkind for doubting her. "This is painful to watch," she said. "A hard-working mother is embarrassed. A little girl is confused. And now everyone is staring at my handbag as if I have done something terrible." She turned her face toward Vittorio, her eyes bright but dry. "Do you truly want our engagement memory to be this?" Vittorio finally looked at her. "I want it to be accurate." The room went quieter. Grace did not understand the weight of that sentence, but she felt the air change. Alessandra slid the cream-colored bag a little farther behind her hip. It was not a dramatic motion. That was what made it worse. It was the kind of small adjustment someone makes when she realizes the object beside her has become louder than her voice. Vittorio noticed. So did Naomi. So did Grace, who hugged her doll until the little cloth head bent sideways. Signora Moretti stepped between them, not fully blocking Vittorio, but enough to place herself in the path of the moment. "Vittorio, the signing is in less than 10 minutes, she said. "Your father respected the family clock. 9 o'clock means 9 o'clock. The guests have flown in. The papers are prepared. Let us not dishonor tradition over a servant's missing trinket." Naomi flinched again, but this time Vittorio saw Grace feel it. The child's chin tucked down, as if the word had landed on her too. Vittorio's expression did not soften. It sharpened. "A trinket has a price," he said. "A memory has a witness." Then he turned back to Grace. "You said it clicks." Grace nodded. "Like my candy box, but smaller." She made a tiny clicking sound with her tongue, then looked frightened by her own courage and pressed her face against Naomi's apron. A man at the far end of the table chuckled under his breath. "We are stopping a De Luca engagement. For a toy sound now." No one laughed with him. Vittorio slowly lifted his eyes toward Alessandra's bag. Alessandra smiled again, but this time the smile arrived late. "Old jewelry often clicks," she said. "There is nothing mysterious about a clasp." "Then there will be nothing difficult about proving it," Vittorio answered. He did not reach for the bag. He did not command. He did not accuse. He simply let the silence stand beside him until it became heavier than any order. Grace looked once more at the cream-colored bag, and in that moment the little golden thread slipped free from her doll's button and fell onto the white tablecloth, shining between worlds. One where a woman in pearls could be believed without proof, and one where a 4-year-old child had just described a broken clasp no stranger should have known. Vittorio did not reach for the cream-colored bag. That would have given Alessandra the one thing she wanted now, a reason to look wounded in front of everyone. Instead, he turned his head toward the photographer, who was still holding his camera with both hands as if the machine had suddenly become too expensive to move. "Show me the last photograph," Vittorio said. The photographer blinked. "Mr. De Luca?" "The one taken when the child spoke." The man swallowed and stepped forward, turning the small screen toward Vittorio. Guests leaned without meaning to. Even the candles seemed to hold still. On the screen, Alessandra looked perfect. Her white dress caught the light. Her cheek rested close to Vittorio's shoulder. Her smile was soft, almost shy, the kind of smile newspapers loved. But Vittorio did not look at her face. He pointed to the lower corner of the frame, where her cream-colored handbag rested beneath her elbow. "Zoom." The photographer tapped the screen. The image enlarged. At first there was only silk, leather, shadow, and the blur of a gold clasp. Then the picture sharpened enough for the room to see what Grace had seen before anyone else wanted to see it. A thin piece of gold chain had slipped from the mouth of the bag, and behind the little round pendant was a faint curved mark, pale against the metal, like a moon with a bite. Taken out of it. Naomi made a sound so small it could have been breath leaving her body. Grace pressed her doll against her chest and whispered, "That is the little moon." Signora Moretti's smile did not vanish. Tightened. "A photograph at that angle proves nothing," she said. "Reflections can distort metal. This is an emotional misunderstanding." Vittorio kept his eyes on the screen. "A photograph does not insult anyone," he said. "It only remembers." Alessandra gave a quiet laugh, but there was no warmth left in it. "Vittorio, darling, this is humiliating. Do you understand what you are doing? You are letting a child from the kitchen turn our engagement into an inspection." The word kitchen moved across Naomi's face like a door closing. Grace looked up at her mother, then down at the golden thread lying on the tablecloth. She did not know why some words made adults smaller. She only knew her mother's shoulders had folded inward again. Vittorio finally looked at Alessandra. "Place the bag on the table." Alessandra's eyes flickered toward Moretti. It lasted less than a second. But less than a second was sometimes enough to tell a careful man where the truth had gone to hide. Moretti stepped forward quickly. "This is unnecessary. The family papers must be signed before 9 o'clock. Your father always said timing was respect." Vittorio reached into his jacket and removed the old silver watch. He laid it beside the champagne glass, the metal face catching the chandelier light. "Then we have 7 minutes to respect the truth." No one spoke. Alessandra slowly placed the bag on the white tablecloth. It looked small there, almost harmless, like a pretty object in a store window. Vittorio did not open it. He looked at Grace instead. "You said the pendant clicks." Grace nodded, half hidden behind Naomi's apron. "There is a tiny door," she said. "Not in the front. In the back. You press where the moon is hurt." A guest near the end of the table whispered, "This is absurd." But he whispered it more softly than before. Vittorio pulled his white pocket square from his jacket and laid it flat beside the bag. "Alessandra," he said, "take out the necklace." Her hand moved. Slowly. Too slowly. She opened the bag only a few inches, reached inside, and brought out the gold necklace as though removing a delicate flower. For one moment the pendant swung over the table, and Grace reached toward it without thinking. Naomi caught her hand gently. "No, baby," she whispered. "Do not touch." Grace pulled her fingers back and curled them around the doll. Vittorio took the necklace with the pocket square, never letting his skin touch the metal. He turned the pendant over. There it was, the broken moon. He found the tiny pressure point Grace had described and pressed it with his thumbnail through the cloth. The pendant opened with a small, tired click. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The sound traveled through the room sharper than the music, sharper than the glassware, sharper than every polite lie that had been set on that table. Inside the pendant was not a jewel. It was a folded piece of old photograph paper, thin from years of being opened and closed. Vittorio stopped breathing for one beat. Alessandra said, "That is private." Grace looked at the open pendant and then at the edge of the photograph. Her face changed, not with triumph but with recognition. "It has the blue paper too," she whispered. Naomi's hand tightened around her daughter's shoulder. Vittorio heard the fear in that silence before Naomi said a word. "What blue paper?" he asked. Grace hid her mouth against the doll, but her eyes stayed on the necklace. And for the first time that night, Naomi looked more frightened of the proof than of the people denying it. Vittorio did not repeat the question. He waited. That was one of the reasons people feared him. He knew silence could make a careless person speak, and it could make a frightened person decide whether the truth was worth the cost. Naomi looked at the open pendant lying on the white pocket square, then at Grace, whose small hand still held the doll as if the faded cloth body contained all the courage she had left. "The blue paper," Naomi said at last, barely above a whisper, "is not inside the necklace. It is mine." Signora Moretti sighed softly, as if disappointed by bad manners rather than concerned by evidence. "Naomi, this has gone far enough." Naomi lowered her eyes. For a moment it seemed she would fold herself back into the shape the room expected from her. Quiet, grateful, invisible. Then Grace reached up and touched the edge of her mother's apron. Not pulling, not begging, just touching. Naomi breathed in, and something in her shoulders changed. She slipped 2 fingers into the small inner pocket of her apron and pulled out a folded piece of blue paper, worn white at the creases, soft from being opened too many times. She did not hand it to Vittorio at first. She held it close, like a person afraid proof could be taken away the same way the necklace had been. "It is a repair slip," she said, "from East Harbor Jewelers. I had the clasp fixed last winter. I kept the paper because—" Her voice stopped. Vittorio finished nothing for her. He only extended his hand, palm up, and waited until Naomi chose to place the paper there herself. He unfolded it on the table beside the pendant. The ink had faded, but the name was still readable. Naomi Carter. Under item description, someone had written, "Gold locket necklace, rear crescent scratch, loose hinge, faulty snap closure." Grace pointed at the words she could not read. "That is the click," she whispered. Alessandra laughed once. A small broken sound that tried to become elegant and failed. "A receipt proves someone owns something similar. It does not prove that necklace is hers." Vittorio looked toward the far end of the table. "Mr. Romano." The man with silver-framed glasses stiffened so slightly most guests would have missed it. He was seated near a floral arrangement, a champagne flute untouched in front of him. Until that moment, he had looked like any other polished guest invited to bless a powerful engagement. Now the room understood why Vittorio had said his name. Dominic Romano owned East Harbor Jewelers. His shop had served old families, judges, bankers, and people who preferred their valuables repaired without questions. "Would you care to explain this repair slip?" Vittorio asked. Romano rose slowly, smoothing his jacket. "Mr. De Luca, I process hundreds of repairs each year. Old slips can be mistaken. Records get transferred. Staff make errors. You wrote this one," Naomi said suddenly. Her voice surprised even her. She touched the blue paper with one trembling finger. "You said the hinge was delicate. You said my mother must have worn it every day because the back was warm smooth, not polished smooth." Romano glanced at her, then away too quickly. Grace watched his face, then leaned close to Naomi and whispered, "That is the shiny glasses man." Vittorio heard her. "What did you say?" Grace hid half her face behind the doll. "He came by the kitchen door before the party. He asked Mommy if she still had Grandma's necklace. Mommy said no. He looked at the blue paper." Naomi froze. The room seemed to tilt around that sentence. Alessandra's hand moved toward the cream-colored bag on the table, then stopped when Vittorio's eyes dropped to it. Moretti's smile disappeared for the first time, not fully, only at the corners. Vittorio turned back to Naomi. When did the necklace go missing? Naomi swallowed. 3 weeks ago. From my locker at another DeLuca event. I reported it to the assistant manager. He told me not to accuse guests unless I wanted to lose shifts. The words did not land loudly. They landed heavily. Several servers standing along the wall lowered their eyes, and one older busboy pressed his lips together like he had heard that kind of warning before. Vittorio looked at the pendant again. The old photograph paper inside had loosened. Using the edge of the pocket square, he eased it open. The picture was torn in half. On the left side was a younger Naomi holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. On the back, written in fading ink, were the words, "For Naomi. Never let them make you invisible." Naomi made a sound that was almost a sob but stopped before it became one. Grace stared at the baby in the picture. "That is me," she said. Then, with careful hands, she reached into the tiny pocket sewn onto her doll's dress and pulled out a wrinkled scrap of photograph. Naomi turned toward her, stunned. "Grace, where did you get that?" "From the blue box," Grace said. "It fell out. I kept it because Mommy was smiling." Vittorio placed the scrap beside the photograph from the pendant. The torn edges matched. The yellow blanket matched. The kitchen curtain behind Naomi matched. The room no longer had to believe the maid. The room could see. But Vittorio did not look relieved. He looked colder because the proof had only answered one question. The necklace belonged to Naomi. It had been taken. It had been hidden in Alessandra's bag. Yet that still did not explain why a woman about to marry into the DeLuca family would risk everything for an old locket from a waitress. Then Vittorio saw Alessandra press her thumb against the side seam of the cream-colored bag, right where the leather bulged strangely beneath the lining, and he understood the necklace was not the secret. It was the key to whatever else she had brought into his house. Vittorio looked at the cream-colored bag for a long moment, but still did not touch it. The necklace, the blue repair slip, the torn photograph, and Grace's little scrap of picture were already lying on the table like pieces of a story the room had refused to read. But the bag had become something else now. Not an accessory. Not a private object. A closed door. Vittorio turned to his assistant, a thin man in a charcoal suit standing near the service hallway. "Bring the hallway camera from the staff corridor," he said. Alessandra's face changed so slightly that anyone else might have called it exhaustion. Vittorio saw calculation. Signora Moretti stepped in before the assistant could move. "Vittorio, this is absurd. You are humiliating your fiancé over a misplaced heirloom and the memories of a child." Naomi lowered her eyes at the word misplaced. Grace did not. She was staring at Alessandra's bag again, and her small fingers tightened around the doll's dress where the gold thread had caught earlier. Vittorio spoke without raising his voice. "A necklace can be misplaced. A pattern is not misplaced." The assistant returned with a laptop less than 2 minutes later. The screen glowed blue against the white tablecloth. Guests leaned back as if the truth might spill out and stain them. The footage began at 7:16 that evening, 17 minutes before the first champagne. Trey entered the private room. The staff corridor appeared in grainy black and white. Naomi's locker stood at the far end beside a stack of folded linens. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then Alessandra appeared on camera. She was not wearing her public smile. She moved quickly, one hand holding the same cream-colored bag, the other lifting the hem of her white dress just enough to keep it from brushing the service floor. She stopped near Naomi's locker. She looked left. She looked right. Then she opened the locker door. A soft sound moved through the dining room. Not quite a gasp. Not quite a whisper. Naomi took one step back as if the screen itself had touched her. Grace reached for her mother's skirt and held it. Alessandra's voice sharpened. "That video shows nothing. I was looking for the ladies' room. Your restaurant is a maze." Vittorio did not answer. On the screen, Alessandra reached inside the locker, then turned her body so the camera could not see her hands. When she walked away, the cream-colored bag rested higher against her wrist, fuller than before. The clip ended. No one clapped. No one joked. Even the photographer had lowered his camera. Vittorio looked to the female head of security standing by the sidewall. Open the lining of the bag. Do it in front of Miss Carter and her child. Alessandra pulled the bag toward herself. You have no right. Vittorio's eyes stayed cold. Then say that to my lawyer, not to my guests. The head of security wore gloves. She opened the bag carefully, removing a lipstick, a folded silk scarf, a compact mirror, and then the inner lining lifted at one corner, too loose for a bag that expensive. Under it was a passport. The room seemed to lose air. Vittorio did not reach for it until the lawyer nodded. He opened it with the edge of his pocket square. The photograph was Alessandra's face, but the name printed beneath it was Elena Ricci. Alessandra went still. It was the first honest thing her body had done all night. Under the passport was a fresh jewelry certification from East Harbor Jewelers, naming Alessandra Bellini as owner of the gold locket. Beneath that was a cream envelope stamped with the De Luca family seal. Vittorio opened it slowly. Inside was an inheritance acknowledgement prepared for the engagement ceremony, marked pending signature. His signature. Naomi did not understand all the words, but she understood the way Vittorio's face changed. Grace did not understand passports or inheritance or family seals. She only pointed toward the envelope and whispered, "That paper smells like the shiny glasses man." Dominic Romano, at the far end of the table, set down his champagne glass too quickly. The rim tapped the plate. Vittorio heard it. Moretti heard it. Alessandra heard it too, and for the first time she looked not at Vittorio, but at Romano. That was the mistake. Vittorio looked from one face to the other, and the pieces locked together with a sound no one else could hear. The stolen locket was not greed. It was proof of a false identity. The forged certification was not carelessness. It was a bridge. The engagement papers were not tradition. They were the final door. Vittorio leaned back very slowly, and the old silver watch beside his glass showed 7 minutes to 9. His face had gone pale, but his voice remained steady. "This was never a wedding," he said. "It was paperwork wearing a white dress." Alessandra opened her mouth, but no words came out. Across the table, Signora Moretti calmly folded her napkin and said, "Vittorio, every family has documents prepared before a union." Vittorio turned his eyes to her. "Then you will not mind explaining why mine was prepared before I proposed." The music had stopped completely now. In the silence, Grace pressed her doll to her chest and watched the grown-ups begin to look afraid of the thing she had seen first. Vittorio did not overturn the table. He did not shout for anyone to be dragged out. Men like him had built their reputations on noise, but his father had taught him that the most dangerous room was the one where everyone believed they were still safe. So Vittorio lifted one hand toward the band near the back wall and said, "Play." The musicians stared at him. The violinist looked from the open passport to Alessandra's face, then back to Vittorio. "Play." Vittorio repeated, softer this time. The first notes returned unevenly, thin and nervous, but they gave the guests something to pretend with. People picked up forks they did not use. Glasses lifted halfway and stopped. Alessandra watched Vittorio with careful eyes, trying to understand whether he was protecting her dignity or setting a place for her at the center of a trap. Vittorio turned to the room and smiled for the first time that night. It was not warm. "Dessert will be served," he said. "No one leaves yet. I would hate for anyone to miss the end of my engagement." The words settled over the white roses like frost. Naomi stood with Grace near the service doors, still too close to the kitchen, still ready to disappear if ordered. Vittorio pointed to a small table beside his own. "Miss Carter and her daughter sit there." Naomi froze. "Mr. De Luca, that is not necessary." "It is," he said. "You were almost removed before you were heard. That will not happen twice." Grace climbed onto the chair with both hands, her little shoes swinging above the floor. She placed her doll on her lap, and the golden thread still clung faintly to the cracked blue button. Vittorio saw Alessandra watch the thread as if it were alive. He leaned toward his assistant and spoke low enough that only the man could hear. "Lock the side exits for maintenance. Keep the front open." Quietly, Copy the security footage from every hallway. Ask my lawyer to come to the main table. The assistant nodded once and vanished into the soft chaos of servers carrying untouched tiramisu and espresso cups no one wanted. Signora Moretti tried to regain the room the way she had controlled weddings, funerals, baptisms, and family disputes for 30 years. She folded her hands and said, "Vittorio, perhaps we should step into a private office. Families do not wash linen in front of strangers." Vittorio looked at the servers lined against the wall, then at Naomi sitting stiffly beside Grace. "Funny," he said. "The strangers seem to be the only ones who told the truth tonight." Moretti's mouth closed. Across the table, Dominic Romano kept cleaning his glasses with a napkin, though the lenses were already spotless. Vittorio watched the motion in the reflection of a silver butter knife. Romano's right thumb tapped twice against his phone under the table. Alessandra's phone lit up inside the open handbag a second later. She did not pick it up, but her eyes dropped to it. Vittorio saw that too. His lawyer, Claire Benton, arrived without ceremony. A woman in a navy suit carrying a tablet and a leather folder. She did not ask what was happening. She looked at the evidence on the table and began photographing each piece in order. Necklace, blue repair slip, torn photograph, child scrap of picture, passport, jewelry certificate, inheritance envelope. "I need the phones of anyone connected to the documents," Vittorio said. Romano stood too fast. "This is outrageous. I am a guest." "Then behave like one," Vittorio said. "Guests do not text the bride when forged papers are found in her bag." Romano went pale around the mouth. Claire held out her hand. After a long pause, Romano gave her the phone. He tried to look insulted, but his fingers shook as the device left his hand. Grace watched him, then leaned toward Naomi and whispered, "Mommy." The old lady gave him the shiny envelope. Naomi turned her head carefully. "What envelope, baby?" Grace pointed under the table, not at Alessandra, but at Moretti. "The silver one." When the music came back, Vittorio heard every word. He did not look right away. Instead, he picked up his water glass and glanced down into the reflection. In the curved surface, he saw Moretti's hand slide toward the inside pocket of Romano's jacket. Too late. One of Vittorio's security women stepped beside Romano and calmly asked him to remove the envelope. Moretti smiled as if the request amused her, but the room had learned to distrust her smile. Romano opened his jacket with slow humiliation and pulled out a narrow silver envelope. Claire took it, broke the seal, and removed a folded document. Her eyes moved across the page once, then again. "This is an inheritance division acknowledgement," she said. "It carries Alessandra Bellini's signature." Vittorio looked at Alessandra. "Interesting," he said, "because Alessandra Bellini does not appear to exist." Alessandra's perfect posture finally weakened. Moretti spoke quickly. "Documents can be corrected after marriage. You know how families work." Vittorio leaned back, his father's watch ticking beside his hand. "Let them finish lying," he said. "Finished lies are easier to sign as evidence." Grace did not understand the sentence, but she understood that no one was trying to send her mother to the kitchen anymore. She looked at the cream-colored bag, then at the silver envelope, and for the first time that night, the adults looked smaller than the truth. At 8:59, Signora Moretti rose with her champagne glass as if the room still belonged to her. The band had lowered into a thin, nervous melody. The guests had gone silent around untouched dessert plates, and the white roses behind the engagement table looked too clean for what had been placed beneath them. Moretti smiled toward the room, not toward Vittorio, and lifted her glass higher. "Family," she said, "is built on trust, tradition, and signatures honored before witnesses." Several guests looked at Vittorio, waiting for him to correct her, stop her, forgive her, or explode. He did none of those things. He stood slowly. The chair behind him moved back an inch across the floor. That sound, small and wooden, ended the music more completely than any command. Vittorio did not lift his glass. He reached for the white tablecloth in front of him and smoothed it once with his palm, making a clean space in the center of the table. Then he looked at Claire Benton. "Read the room the truth." Claire stepped forward with her tablet. One by one, Vittorio placed the evidence where every eye could see it. First, the enlarged photograph from the photographer's camera, showing the gold chain slipping from Alessandra's cream-colored bag. Second, the single gold thread still caught on the cracked blue button of Grace's doll. Third, Naomi's blue repair slip from East Harbor Jewelers, with her name and the words rear crescent scratch and faulty snap closure. Fourth, the open locket with the torn photograph inside. Fifth, the matching scrap Grace had kept in her doll's pocket. Naomi sat very still as each piece appeared, as if watching her own dignity being rebuilt 1 inch at a time. Grace sat beside her, both hands on the doll, her feet not touching the floor. She did not smile. She watched because that was the only thing she had done all night, and it had mattered more than any toast. Claire continued, calm and precise. Security footage from 716 shows Miss Bellini entering the staff corridor, approaching Miss Carter's locker, and leaving with the same handbag visibly fuller. The passport recovered from the bag identifies the bearer as Elena Ricci. The fresh jewelry certification names Alessandra Bellini as the owner of the locket, despite an older repair record under Naomi Carter's name. The inheritance acknowledgement was prepared before the proposal date and marked pending signature. Alessandra stood then, her face pale beneath the makeup, but her voice stayed soft enough to make people doubt their own judgment if they had not just seen the proof. "Vittorio, I was afraid," she said. "There were legal complications. I was going to explain everything after the wedding." Vittorio looked at her for a long second. "After my name protected your lie." She flinched, but only slightly. Moretti set down her champagne glass. "This can be handled privately. A family does not fracture itself in front of staff." Vittorio turned his head toward Naomi. "The staff were present when you tried to erase them. They can be present when you fail." The room went cold. Romano wiped his glasses again, but Claire lifted his phone before he could speak. "There are messages," she said. "From Miss Ricci to Mr. Romano and Signora Moretti. Certify the necklace before the signing. The maid has no standing. Vittorio only needs to sign once." A murmur passed through the guests, not loud, but final. Alessandra's eyes filled, and for one last moment she chose the mask that had brought her this far. She touched her engagement ring and whispered, "That woman stole from the Bellinis first." Naomi's face crumpled, not from guilt, but from the exhaustion of being accused by people who never needed proof to be believed. Grace saw it. She climbed down from the chair before Naomi could stop her, carried the doll to the table and stood beside the evidence. She did not point at Alessandra. She did not understand forged names or inheritance papers. She only touched the locket with one careful finger through Vittorio's pocket square and said, "Mommy cried when it was gone." No one answered. That sentence did what the documents could not. It made the theft human. Vittorio looked around the room at the cousins who had laughed, at the guests who had looked away, at the servers who had lowered their eyes because they knew how silence was trained into poor people. Then he removed the De Luca family ring from his finger and placed it beside the unsigned papers. "You all counted on the maid being silent," he said. "You forgot her daughter knew what silence was hiding." Romano broke first. His voice came out dry. "Moretti brought me the certification language. Elena only needed the necklace tied to the Bellini name before the acknowledgement was signed." Moretti's mouth opened, but Vittorio raised one hand and she stopped as if the air itself had warned her. Alessandra looked toward the exits and found De Luca security standing there, calm, professional, not touching anyone, simply making it clear that the night now belonged to evidence. Vittorio turned to Claire. "Seal every document. Copy every recording. No one touches the table." Then he looked at Alessandra, not with rage, but with something colder. "You wanted my name," he said. "You forgot my name comes with witnesses." The first thing Vittorio did was not punish anyone. He protected the evidence. That mattered more than anger, and everyone in the room seemed to understand it when Claire Benton slid clear document sleeves across the table and began placing each item inside with measured hands. The necklace, the blue repair slip, The torn photograph. Grace's matching scrap from the doll pocket. The enlarged camera image. The hallway footage copy. The passport under the name Elena Ricci. The jewelry certification. The silver envelope. The unsigned inheritance acknowledgement. One by one, the pretty engagement table became a record. Alessandra stood beside the white roses with her hands folded so tightly, her knuckles looked drained of color. Signora. Moretti no longer smiled. Dominic Romano kept his eyes on the floor, as if the pattern in the carpet could save him from what his own phone had already said. Vittorio looked at Claire. File this tonight. Notify the authorities. Freeze every document connected to this engagement. Claire nodded. Already in progress. Alessandra's voice came out thin. Vittorio, please. You cannot do this to me in front of everyone. He looked at her for the last time as his fiancée. I am not doing this to you. I am stopping what you tried to do to my name, my house, and a woman you believed nobody would defend. Then he turned to the guests. This engagement is cancelled. No signature will be honored. No promise made under fraud will stand. No one clapped. This was not that kind of victory. It was quieter and heavier, the kind that made people look at themselves before looking at the door. De Luca security escorted Alessandra, Moretti, and Romano to a private waiting room near the front entrance. Not with roughness, not with spectacle, but with the calm order of people preserving a legal chain. The photographer surrendered the memory card. The restaurant manager brought printed time logs. Two servers stepped forward and told Claire they had seen Alessandra near the staff corridor before dinner but had been afraid to report it. Vittorio listened to them without interrupting. Naomi sat still, her hands folded in her lap, as if she did not know what a room looked like when it stopped blaming her. Grace leaned against her side. The doll pressed between them. The golden thread still clung to the cracked blue button. Vittorio picked up the locket only after Claire sealed the paperwork confirming Naomi's repair slip and photograph match. He carried it to Naomi with both hands, using his white pocket square beneath it. He did not drop it into her palm like payment. He held it out like something that had a history before it had a price. Miss Carter, he said, and the room heard the name clearly. This belongs to you. Naomi stared at the necklace. Her lips trembled once. Mr. De Luca, I just wanted my daughter not to be called a liar. Vittorio lowered his head. Then I owe both of you more than returning gold. He turned back to the guests, to the cousins, to the managers, to the staff along the wall. Tonight, my house almost believed a polished lie because it came from a woman in silk. And it almost dismissed the truth because it came from a child standing behind her mother's apron. That failure is mine to correct. By morning, every employee at Belladonna and every De Luca restaurant would receive a written protection policy for reporting theft, fraud, threats to employment, or document abuse. Naomi's missed wages from the weeks after the necklace disappeared would be repaid. Her job would be restored under a new contract with legal protection, not a quiet favor. The assistant manager who told her not to accuse guests would be suspended pending review. East Harbor Jewelers would lose all De Luca business while investigators examined years of certifications. Moretti's authority in family arrangements would be removed that night, in writing, before any relative could soften the truth into gossip. Grace did not understand most of it. She only watched Vittorio place the locket in Naomi's hands. Naomi opened it with the little broken click, and Grace reached up to help close it again. This time, nobody told her not to touch. Naomi held the necklace against her chest and finally let out the breath she had been holding since the first flash of the camera. Grace looked at the cream-colored handbag sitting empty on the table. No longer shiny, no longer powerful, no longer hiding anything. Then she looked away. Vittorio noticed that most of all, the child who had stared at the bag all night was done with it. The truth had moved back to its rightful owner. As the guests began leaving in silence, Vittorio picked up his father's silver watch and fastened it around his wrist. The minute hand had passed 9. The family clock had been broken after all, but not by Grace Carter. It had been broken by every adult who thought truth could be scheduled after a signature. Vittorio looked once more at Naomi and her daughter. Tonight, he said softly. The The smallest witness in this room told the truth before any of us had the courage to look at it. Grace did not answer like a hero. She was only 4. She yawned, tucked her doll under her chin, and leaned into her mother. Naomi wrapped one arm around her child and the other around the locket. And for the first time that night, she stood in the center of the room without lowering her eyes.